Good morning. I'm Barry McKay and I'm the Fund Actuary to the London Borough of Hounslow Pension Fund. Over the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a brief update on the 2022 funding valuation. It's a significant piece of work which provides an update on the financial health of the fund and the cost to you as employers over the next 3 years. So, I'm going to cover the valuation process and the results for the whole fund. As an employer, you'll get your own set of results shortly. But first, I'll run through some of the terms we use. The assets are the investments held by the fund to pay pensions, and the assets are invested by the fund in a wide range of asset classes such as equities, bonds and property, so that the assets grow and help pay for the pensions. As an employer, you're allocated assets based on the investment return achieved by the fund, the contributions you pay in, and the pensions paid out to your members by the fund. So it effectively works in the same way as a bank account. The liabilities are an estimate of the amount of money that we think the fund needs to pay all the pensions that have been accrued or earned by members to the valuation date. And to place a value in the liabilities, we need to make a number of assumptions. And I'll discuss how those impact the fund shortly. Your results will show your financial position, known as the funding level, which is the ratio of the assets to the liabilities. The assets are your share of the fund's investments, and the liabilities are an estimate of how much money you need to pay your members' benefits. If you have a funding level of over 100%, then you'll have a surplus. And if you have a funding level of less than 100%, then you have a deficit. The second outcome of the valuation is the contribution rate. So how much will you have to pay in to the fund over the next 3 years? And this is made up of two parts. The primary rate, which is the cost of the benefits accruing in the future, and the secondary rate, which is an adjustment for the funding position that you have. So if you have a deficit, you might have to pay in a little bit more to make good that deficit. And if you have a surplus, then you might be able to pay in a little bit less. And the total contributions you pay are just the sum of the primary and the secondary rate. And of course, a key objective of the actuary and the fund is to keep employer contribution rates as stable as possible. To calculate the liabilities, the current value of the pension to be paid to members and the future cost, we need to make lots of assumptions, and these are split into two groups, financial and demographic. The financial assumptions cover such things as inflation, salary increases and investment returns, and they will determine the amount of pension to be paid in the future. So when pension increases are high, inflation's high, then the cost of the scheme increases. And the same is true for salary increases. If people are being paid more, they'll earn more pension, which will cost more to pay. The investment return works in the opposite way. If the higher the investment return achieved by the fund, then the lower the cost in cash terms, because the assets are doing the heavy lifting. So the more you earn from your assets, the less cash needs to go in. The second group of assumptions is the demographic assumptions, which help determine for how long a benefit will be paid and when pensions will be paid. So assumptions like normal retirement age, early retirement, and longevity, how long will people live. The fund is a long-term investor, and any assumptions we make are therefore for the long term, but they can have a very large impact on the valuation results. So, for example, if members live 1 year longer than we've allowed for, that'll add 3 or 4% to the liabilities, and around 0.5% of pay to the future service cost, the primary rate. So on to the whole fund results. Good news here. At the last valuation, the funding level was 94%. So the assets held was a little bit over £1 billion, but the liabilities that we estimated the amount that the fund needed was 1 billion. So there's a gap of 66 million, as you can see on page 7. However, we've had a good result this time, and the funding levels increased to 105% with a surplus of 53 million. And so the fund is in a very strong position. And why has that happened? Well, this chart on page 8 shows how we've moved from that deficit position in 2019 to the surplus position in 2022. Green bars are good things for the fund, and yellow bars are not good news. That pushes the liabilities up. So the main reason is the very strong investment performance, which you can see there's added 71 million in excess of what we assumed. There's also been lower pension increases, which has helped to keep the liabilities down a little bit. And even though people are still living longer than in the past, those improvements have slowed down slightly. So our assumption reflects that, and therefore has reduced the liabilities slightly compared to 2019. On the downside, we're seeing higher inflation at this valuation unexpectedly, and therefore that has increased the liabilities. But all in all, good news. The not so good news is that the cost of the pensions building up in the future has also increased, although only marginally, from 18.9% to 19.3% of pay. And that's just really down to that inflationary pressure again. The fact that inflation is expected to be higher in the future than in the past pushes the cost of benefits up. But overall, we should be able to keep employer contributions stable. So, to summarise, good news, strong asset performance has resulted in the funding level being above 100% for the first time in as long as I can remember. And that gives us a bit more headroom for adverse conditions in the future. And the bad news is that increase in primary rate because effectively higher inflation is being assumed going forward. And lastly, what's next? Well, we'll communicate the employer results very shortly. We will be updating the funding strategy statement, and this will be issued to all employers, allowing you to comment under the consultation process. And then we will complete the valuation by providing a final valuation report, a rates and adjustment certificate, which effectively shows each contribution rate that needs to be paid for the next 3 years for each employer, and signing off the funding strategy statement, taking into account any comments that you may have. And all that will be completed by 31st of March, with the new contribution rates becoming effective from 1st of April 2023. So I hope this has been useful, and thank you for listening.